Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome to So Supportive. This week we are working on a project for the Quilting 101 Back to Basics. So long that I've been doing. All of the links are below for all of the participants, so please go visit their channels and see what kind of blocks they are making. But today we are working on something that I learned from Bonnie Hunter over at Quiltville. And this is an interesting technique. I'm not sure if she created it, but we're just gonna give her the credit because that's where I learned it from. But you take 2.5-inch charm squares and you can turn them into these little adorable hourglass blocks without cutting triangles. And if you don't want to make 2.5-inch hourglass blocks from 2.5-inch charm squares, you can take 5-inch charm squares and make these beauties that come out to be about 6.5 inches. And if you didn't want to take 5-inch charm squares, you could take a 10-inch layer cake and make an even bigger hourglass block, just like this. So why don't you join me today for this quick video that will show a really fun technique that I think you will enjoy, and you'll learn how to make these fun hourglass blocks without cutting triangles. So this little adventure started with a video that I saw by Bonnie Hunter. Now, if you don't know who Bonnie Hunter is, she has been a quilter for many, many years and has a website called Quiltville and has a huge community on Facebook. And she also had a regular column in Quilt Maker magazine. That's how I met her. And one day she's got a retreat center in Virginia and she got a gift of a charm pack. So it was a charm pack like this, you know, just a little small 2.5 mini charm pack. It wasn't this pattern, but this was just one that I happened to have. And she showed a little trick in I think it was a 3-minute video. I'll link it here, where she took her charm squares, put them like this, and you're not going to be able to see it, but she stitched down, I should have used a different color thread. She stitched down 1/4 inch on each side, just on the 2 outer sides right here. Then what she did was she took a ruler and she went from corner to corner like this and cut the square in half. And then what happens is that you get 2 triangles like this. You press them to whichever side is the darker, which I'll go do right now, and then you sew them together like this to get an hourglass. Let me do that and I'll be right back. All right, and like that, you've got a little hourglass shape. And what's interesting is that this is actually comes out to be just slightly larger than 2.5 inches, which is kind of cool. I've got, you know, obviously it's a little bit off, but I can just trim that up to 2.5 inches and I've got an adorable little hourglass. So this idea prompted me to think about what happens if. So the first thing I thought of was what happens if I take a 5-inch charm pack. And this is what happens if you have a 5-inch charm pack. You get hourglasses that are, let's see, they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 inches big when you take 2 5-inch squares. And I thought this was super cool. And so then from there, I thought, well, what happens if you take a 10-inch charm pack, or, you know, a 10-inch layer cake, and do the same thing. So I did the 2 lines, you know, 1/4 of an inch down each side. Obviously these, you can even tell, are, you know, not even from the same manufacturer, so they're slightly different sizes. But what I did was I just went with the smaller one and stitched along there. And then all you have to do is, in the same way, stitch down the sides, trim from corner to corner, which I'll do right now. And then I'll show you exactly how you pin it. So this one's got a little bit of a weird corner, so I'm just going to go with it because, like I said, these don't come out perfect. And this is the bias edge that you're trimming right here. So you do have to pull apart the few little stitches at the top corner. They usually come right out. And then you're going to press it towards the dark. Do the same with the second one, which will be the mirror image. And look how big those are. Kind of cool, huh? So now that these are pressed in opposite directions, what I can do when I flip these is, and I'm going to try and get to the camera real well, is I can nest the seam right here so that it perfectly aligns. And I just make sure that those are pushed up. I usually will drop a pin or a clip right here, and then I open it up to make sure that it is lined up. And if it's not, like this is not quite, I just kind of push it over to where it is and then repin here. And then, now here is one tip. So sometimes it is a little bit funny along here. Don't worry about that. This is just a fun project to make hourglass blocks. You're going to stitch along here. Now remember, be a little bit careful along the edges here because now this is where the bias edge is. It's on the outer edges. And so it can stretch a bit, but once you sew across there, you've got this beautiful block, which I'll pull one that's actually already done. Right, like that. And let's measure it. I'll tell you exactly how big it comes out. See, it's actually bigger than a 12.5 inches. So let's see if I've got a larger square. All right, let's measure it to see how big it is. And this block came out to be 13, just under 13.5 inches. Let's see if it's the same this way. Yep, 13.5 inches. So you can see that you've got a little bit of wiggle room to trim this down to a 12.5 inch block. And let me actually show you how you would do that. So you would need a ruler that has a diagonal line, and you are going to line up that diagonal line along this measurement here. Now, this is 12.5 inches, so this is actually perfect. I can just trim along those edges and I've got a perfect 12.5 inch hourglass. However, if, say, you wanted a different size, like for instance, for our quilt along that we've been working on, we need a 10.5 inch block. I can actually slide this down here. Half of 10.5 is 5.25. And so I would want this 5.25 line to be at the center of my hourglass. I'm going to make sure that the diagonal line still lines up, but that 5.25 line that's right here, I want that to hit the center of my hourglass. And then I can trim off this edge, flip it around, and trim off the other edge. And I get a beautiful hourglass that looks like this. And so I just think this is a totally fun technique. It's perfect for using up our charm squares, whether they're 2.5 inches, 5 inches, or 10-inch squares. And it's just something fun that you can try, and it makes a beautiful quilt. Here are a few examples of hourglass quilts that I found on the interwebs that I thought you might like to look at. They're scrappy and pretty, and some even use solids, but they're all just gorgeous. Thanks so much for joining me today for this quick tutorial for the Quilting 101 Back to Basics Sew Along. As I mentioned earlier, please go check out the links below for the other participants who are sewing along as well. And if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. And if you're enjoying the channel overall, I would love it if you subscribed. YouTube thinks that you're gonna like this video right here next. So why don't you give it a watch and see if you enjoy the channel. But we have a wonderful community here of people who, like me, have autoimmune and other health challenges. And I work a lot on UFOs and different projects throughout the year as the mood strikes, and sometimes do an occasional tutorial. So I hope that you will stick around and give us a chance. The community here is wonderful. Also want to remind you all that I go live every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, and we have so much fun. We are currently, well, I am currently stitching on the village quilt that is shown here, but everyone can just either bring a project that they want to catch up on or lurk in the comments and just hang out and chat. So I hope that you will join us sometime or watch the replay. It's loads of fun. So I will see you next week. Thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.